Common values. Common goals. Common sense. The Common Sense Podcast with Semi Bird.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me and you can see me okay. This is Semi Bird, candidate for Washington State Governor, coming to you live streaming. And so this is our very first episode. And we chose to go live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And then we're going to record this at the very end. We'll upload to Rumble and many others. And so I want everybody to understand, why did I decide to do a podcast? There's a couple other things. Number one, it gives me an opportunity to connect with all of you, and it gives you an opportunity to connect with me. So we're testing out brand new waters. We have new equipment. We have new software. And so we're just going to pray that everything goes the way we want it to go. And if it doesn't, we'll just do better next time. One of the key things that we wanted to accomplish in terms of episode 1 was simply this: to let you know, and those who are not familiar with who I am as candidate for Washington State Governors, who is this guy, right? What is he about? What does he stand for? What are we looking at? What is your pathway to victory, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just start. Let's go back a little bit in history. Some of you know my background. Some of you know how I started my life in this world. And it began with a humble background. It began being born pre-civil rights in 1961 to a beautiful single woman with 7 children, all by herself, my role model, my mother, my inspiration. She raised me on what she would say, scripture and common sense, right? And she wanted a verse every night, and she wanted a word every night, because she believed that with the love of God and a quality education, there is nothing that any child could accomplish in life. And I'll tell you this straight and plainly. Being a Black American child, being a Black American single woman, we're all Americans. We understand that. But we also understand, common sense-wise, it was different times for Black Americans than it is now for Black Americans. And this is like this all over the world. Certain groups find themselves at the wrong end at the wrong time, and such was the case. And Martin Luther King Jr. came in, and he fought for and died for the soul of America. We have so much to be thankful for, and I know I do as well. And so started out with a humble background. Mom moved us to Seattle, Washington. That's right. People will say Semi Bird is the candidate from Eastern Washington, has no chance of winning in Western Washington. It's important to understand I was raised in Seattle, Washington since I was age 6 or 7. It's a little fuzzy back then. From K through 11, terrible grades, dropped out of high school, took the route to go into the United States Marine Corps. My due diligence said the best looking uniforms in all the armed forces, I'm going that way. And my mother made me promise to get my high school diploma when I was in. And I did just that. And so I enlisted. I enlisted as enlisted. I worked my way up slowly but surely. I got my high school diploma. I did 2 terms or 2 enlistments. I got my good conduct medal. I got my honorable discharge. And then years later, I went to college. And for my bachelor's degree in business administration, summa cum laude, 4.0 GPA, because we never count a child out. We never give up on ourselves. And my mother, my entire life, I remember saying, honey, you can do better. Baby, you can do better. You're going to be just fine. You can. And I'm a broken record saying this. My mother raised me to be an American and not an Americant. Because when you start off, so to speak, behind that 8 ball, you want your child to have the resiliency to overcome and navigate adversity. And I've done just that my entire life. So I got my college degree. I went on, I got a graduate degree in human resources development. Post 9/11, I decided that I wanted to volunteer to be an Army Special Forces Green Beret. And so starting out as a Marine, Semper Fi, to all my devil dogs out there. And then 16 years later, here I am, becoming a Green Beret in Special Forces during Iraqi freedom, enduring freedom. At age 43, I put that tab on my shoulder. I put that Green Beret in my head, and I went to action. Deployment. I served on a Special Forces A team as a Special Forces engineer, and that's construction, civil engineering, bridging, and then demolitions. To understand how you build it, we understand how to destroy it. And that's special forces engineering and so much more. Vulnerability analysis. And I'll let you Google the rest. And then later on, I decided to become a special forces intelligence leader. And I did. And I've served with some great units throughout my time. I've had some blessings in combat. I zigged when I should have zagged. So I got the Bronze Star of Valor and the Purple Heart and some other medals. But it's not the medal that makes the person. It's that duty, that honor, that understanding of selfless service that really defines a person's service to their nation. And I want everybody to understand this. For all military out there, first and foremost, thank you for your service. Thank you for stepping up. If we go back to the War of Independence, 12.5% of our Continental Army made up the population. So 12.5% of our population back then, of the colonists, were serving in the armed forces, fighting for our independence. Today, 0.04% of the population serves in uniform. And for those of you who still serve, thank you. Thank you for standing on that line of defense, being that sentinel at the gate to protect and to defend the Constitution. And by the way, that was our oath of office, our oath of enlistment, to protect and to defend the Constitution. And if you look at the totality of all citizens alive that have either served or are serving still alive, it's only 7%. So we went from 12.5% of the population serving to give us our independence to 0.04 of the population willing to step up and to serve. And I want to assert this. Now more than ever is the time to protect and to defend the Constitution of the United States. And make no mistake about it, we are a constitutional republic. And so many people have no idea what is a constitutional republic. And I can tell you why. It's because we stopped teaching civics in our school system. We stopped doing a lot of things right. And now look at where we're at in terms of our society. The breakdown of our American family, that nuclear family as it's often defined, where we have so many families, especially in the Black and Brown community, Black Americans, where you have such a high percentage without the father in that household. That is a problem. As a nation, as a state, we should be doing everything that we can in our powers to maintain our families. Family values are American values, and it's important. So we'll talk a lot more about that and what I stand for. But after I left active duty, I decided that after we were blessed with the announcement that we're going to have our youngest daughter, Hannah. I was going to go to the CIA. I decided to go for a different path. And we were blessed to be able to get a job with the United States Department of Energy. I worked my way up from a GS nothing to a GS 14 out of 15. I became a federal director. I served as the director of organizational development. At one point in time, I was acting chief of staff for the Hanford Nuclear Site, Office of River Protection. And then I retired from the United States Department of Energy as the federal director of training and leadership development at the Office of River Protection. Some amazing people there, and also with Richland operations supporting remediation. And now where we're at with disposal of that nuclear waste. Different conversation, maybe down the line when we talk about energy independence. I have some great ideas for you there. Retired from the military as well, joint service from my Marine Corps time and my Army time. So I received my retirements from federal government, my retires from the military. And then I went and I taught at WSU. I was an employee for Washington State University, teaching leadership, communications, basically how to operate a business, how to run a business more effectively, more efficiently. It was a great class. We had a lot of fun. And I decided as a serial entrepreneur, I was going to go ahead and become a business consultant where I helped other corporations, other companies, and organizations to be able to perform better, to function better, to understand that their employees are their center of gravity, and then they help leaders become better leaders. Could you imagine those skill sets being utilized in our government in Olympia? I think we need leadership. I think we've been lacking leadership. I think we need fiscal responsibility. I think we need performance in all departments. And if we had that, we wouldn't be taxing our citizens every 5 seconds and then making up taxes that are unconstitutional according to our Washington state government. But again, that's another discussion for a later time. In today's episode, I want you to get to know me. Who am I? What is my motivations? Some of you know that if you know me, I had been asked to run for office for many years, senior offices, Congress, Senate, not just state, but U.S. And I said, no, respectfully, not interested. I've served. God kept me alive so I can take care of my family and be happy as a father and as a husband. And I have been. But when this administration shut down our businesses, our places of worship, and the trigger for me are schools, and my daughter came home in the 7th grade with a laptop, I knew better as a behavioral scientist that our children do not learn well with the laptop. They need that social engagement. They need that in-person learning. They need that teacher, those amazing career Americans who choose to educate young people, to put themselves out there, to develop our young minds. And make no mistake about it, they are also heroes, those educators, those teachers, those administrators. And we can talk about our bus drivers and our food service personnel, all those individuals that get in there in our schools and they do their best. There's a lot more we need to do as a state to support this. And we'll talk about that probably in another episode on common sense. And so that was my trigger to say, I need to get involved because everything I've been watching is going sideways. And I'm not the guy that sits in the sidelines with a camera and just waits for someone else to step up. I knew better. And so I stepped up. I ran for school board. We were successful. 2 new school board directors were elected in 2021. I was one of them. And we went to work. The very first day I attended my very first school board meeting, I raised my hand. I swore that oath. I took a seat. And the first motion that came to bear was a motion that I brought forward to stand up the first ever parent advisory committee so that our parents, which make no mistake about it, are the primary stakeholders in our children's lives and certainly in our children's education. There's a reason for that. So we got that motion passed. And this was a first ever for our school district. Why is this so important? Well, empirically and statistically, children do better when parents are involved in their education. Children acclimate to their educational environment when parents are more involved in their education. And the numbers speak for themselves. Well, the numbers also speak for themselves right here in Washington State. When we have 50.9% of all students fail or just able to meet grade level standards for English and language arts. So I want to restate that. Only 50.9% of all students met grade level standards for English and language arts. Only 37.9% of all students in Washington State make grade level standards for math, and only 42.9% of all students in Washington State were able to meet grade level standards in science. So essentially, academically, we are failing our students, but yet we make time for diversity, equity, and inclusion. That law that was passed, Senate Bill 5044. I think what we should have done in legislation was to pass a bill that required academic excellence within our school system. That should be the priority, because what are schools for? If not to educate our children, to set them up for success in their future. Parents are a critical component of that academic success and that academic excellence. And so we passed that. We also passed, as a new school board, another policy that says we will not teach critical race theory within our school. We will focus on teaching civics. We will teach truth and history, but we will never teach a child that the color of their skin determines their outcome in life. That's not what Martin Luther King Jr. fought for and died for. He fought for equal access, equal opportunity, not equality in outcome, not equity in outcome. Because our success in life, regardless of your race, creed, color, or religion, is it not based on your own effort? I say it is. And then when you teach any group or any race that there is something wrong with them, that they're victims of our own nation, of the nation that they were born into, that is wrong. That is racism in and of itself. And I would argue and assert that is part of what I call a progressive plantation to keep marginalized groups captive in the old world. You see, I remember what segregation was like. I remember what disparate impact was like. I remember where you could not go here, drink here, or eat here. I remember that. I remember those names. I remember the spitting and the name calling and the humiliation. I remember all that. But I stand before you as someone who believes in the essence of America, because if you understand America, this is that nation, that melting pot that says, regardless of the color of your skin, there is nothing that you cannot accomplish in America if you're willing to work hard for it. I believe that to be true. And I think, and I believe that as a state, especially as a state government, we should start honoring some of those promises. We should get out of the way. We should start lifting people out of poverty and despair. That's what we should start doing. And we'll talk about that in policy. And so also as a school board, we took a stance to say when we had a high suicide rate, the highest, lost learning, children on suicide watch, a mental health crisis, and children protesting outside of their classrooms, refusing to wear a mask because they were at their end, the anxiety, the depression, the issues that it derived, do we not have an obligation to push back? Do we not have an obligation to protect the innocence and the lives of our children? Well, 3 of us in our school board have said yes. And we made a motion, and we passed a motion to say that we will give choice as to whether parents would have their children wear masks or not. If you wanted them to, you could. If you did not want to, you had that choice as well. I think we call that equity. So we brought equity to our school district. But the superintendent, the teachers union, and the progressives that are within our communities, they had a different thought. They were going to shut down our schools because the teachers union told that superintendent, if you go along with what your board just did, not only will we make things difficult, teachers will not show up. That's what we were dealing with. And at the end of the day, after threats of recall and lawsuit, things didn't go well for the 3 of us. Well, I was never running for another office. My term of serving was over within 60 to 90 days. Another school board member was not running for re-election. Another school board member was running for re-election. But it didn't matter because the leaders of the recall, what did they say? On a recorded camera, we will fix the mistake that was the election. And so when we talk about our education system, when we talk about motivations, what inspires people to get more active, to get more engaged, I saw enough to say that we, as a people, can no longer sit on the sidelines and wait. We can no longer put our heads in the sand and call ourselves the silent majority. It is time for us to stand up, to protect and to defend the Constitution, the innocence of our children, the sanctity of families. If not us, who? If not now, when? I assert this, my friends, citizens of Washington and abroad. It is time for we the people to take a stand, to hold true to our values, our beliefs, to recognize that America is a great and gracious nation, that we are not systemically racist in America. But arguably, we are that one nation that everyone fled to come to. They fled subjugation, marginalization, oppression, subjugation. They fled those countries to come to this country known as America so that they could have the freedom, liberty, and opportunity to succeed based on their own merit. This is America. And I will tell you this and now, 1961 to 2023, there is nothing that we cannot do in this day and age. I'll say it again, no matter what your color, your religion, your preference. And so who am I? I'm a person who loves everyone. I'm a person who believes in common sense governance. I'm a person who believes in service servant leadership, selfless service. If you believe in the greatness of a nation, I believe in the greatness of this nation. And I also believe that we have yet to realize our true potential as Americans in this great nation, America. So my motivation to run was simple. That's who I am. I serve. I was awarded the Purple Heart. I left DNA in the streets of Baghdad. There's my commitment. I was willing to die for my nation. Why would I not be able or be willing to serve my state in its time of need? My friends, we're at the precipice right now in Washington State, and they say Washington State is a blue state. Washington State is hopeless. There is nothing that can be done. Election integrity, forget about it. They're going to steal it. Do you see that PSYOP, that psychological operation that we are self-perpetrating amongst our citizens to say, why even try? Give up, leave, run away, flee the state. I say no. I say now is the time to stand strong for one another. And I am not fighting against anyone. I am fighting for everyone. So there's my motivation for running for governor of Washington State. You know my background. You know my history. You know that I've navigated adversity my entire life. And I think after you hear this story, would you not say that I am, or I do, demonstrate the greatness and graciousness of America when you understand where I started and you see where I'm at? We're making history right now. We are making history right now. As a candidate, we have over 13 endorsements by different Republican parties across the state. The most important endorsement I think a person could have is from every citizen, not the big organizations, not the big unions, not the big wealthy elitists. And that is another concern. Do you realize that the candidates we have been voting for, probably for years, decades, we think they were our choice? But how many of those candidates were decided well before they came to the stage to present themselves? How many of them were decided by the political establishment and the wealthy elite, deemed worthy, deemed anointed to run to represent the citizens? And what I say to that is this: it is we, the people, who will determine who our candidate is. Some of you know what I'm dealing with right now. I was in the crosshairs of Randy Cruz just a couple days ago. I was on the stage at a Jason Ranch KTTH forum, and it was a great event. And Jason asked me, well, Simi, what about that elephant in the room, that concern of splitting the vote? Splitting the vote. Here's what I want you to understand. You don't see that question being asked for the other candidates, not nearly as much as it's being asked to me. Why do you think that is? We'll keep that rhetorical for now. How about the fact that since I started running for governor, I've had a U.S. Congresswoman, Republican, try to talk me out of running for governor for Washington State? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that all of the senior political Republicans in Olympia are not endorsing me, but they're endorsing the other gentleman who's running as a conservative or running as a Republican? Why do you think that is? And why do you think I received calls from many of them and big money donors asking me to step aside and to step out of the race? Well, I'll give you my view on this. It's because they realize that the grassroots, the we the people, are standing and coming together, and that the citizens of this state from different demographics, especially our youth, are stepping forward. And many amongst our minority communities are stepping forward and saying, we are going to stand strong with Byrd for governor because we believe in his message of inclusivity, of love for one another, civility. But most importantly, forget about politics. It's time to put people over partisanship. It's time to bring back civility and human decency. That is what I stand for. And we'll have a moment and we'll talk about perhaps my policies. And there are several. Because instead of having talking points, what you'll notice if you go to my website, byrdforgovernor.com, byrdforgovernor.com, you'll see solutions with actions. We have a whole section where we actually go into the weeds talking about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Because you need to know the difference we're going to make. You need to understand that once we win the primary, that it is game on, because it looks like we will in fact win the general election, because we will inspire more individuals to come together around one mission, and the mission is to save Washington State. This is a powerful revival of We the People, and I'm hoping you're all going to participate in it, because it's something that is historic. You don't want to miss it. So I'm going to take a look to my monitor here. I think we have some people that have signed on. I'm going to operate some of my technology, make sure we're tracking correctly. All right, let's see who we have here. And I do have a couple questions that I already know have popped up. I think we have our chat room. We have a lot of people in the audience right now. And I'm looking at some of our questions. Let's see here. One of the notes, by the way, I'm seeing here, folks, if you're in your cell phone, you're going to have difficulties accessing our audience here. But if you go to YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook on your cell or mobile devices, you'll be able to see us live. You may not be able to interact within our audience. And again, this is one of those things that we're sorting out. You see, I'm looking at this. I love it. Someone says, welcome. You see. All right. Here we go. Second Amendment. Thank you. So this comes from Corey. Corey says, Simi, how will you protect our gun rights? Well, here's an update for you. This is Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution, obviously the Second Amendment of our national Constitution. This administration, Bob Ferguson, Jay Inslee, and others, obviously in a Democratic-controlled legislature, passed an assault weapons ban, passed a ban on what they call high-capacity magazines, which essentially says anything over 10 rounds per magazine is considered high capacity. I would assert this. Tell that to that single mom trying to protect her children when someone hyped up in PCP or other narcotics is kicking in her door at dark 30. You're going to quickly find, and I know this from combat, 10 rounds may not cut it. So keep that in mind. But here's where we're at. This is constitutional. We have an administration right now that has gone forward and forgot that the Constitution, according to Washington State's Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, our Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But yet this administration, at every turn, finds reasons to take away our constitutional rights, like our guns rights. Well, here's some good news. Judge Benavides, this is just a few weeks ago, Judge Benavides of the 9th District, to which Washington State is part of that 9th District, he was rendering his opinions on a case in California, pretty much the same magazine round ban, same as Washington State. It went up to the Supreme Court. It was kicked back down to the 9th, as it should have been, because the Supreme Court says this is a no-brainer. This is not a case for the Supreme Court. We have a Constitution. Obey that. And Judge Benavides, I read his opinion paper, he clearly pointed out that this was a frivolous law and a frivolous attack on our constitutional rights. And he rendered as such. So when we have Bob Ferguson going against the owners of Gators Guns, for example, in Southwest Washington, that small business that has been targeted by our own state attorney general with lawsuits and threats of legal and or possible criminal action, which is against the Constitution to begin with. But here's what happens. You target a citizen, you tie them up in legal court, and all that money that has to be paid for attorney's fees, that comes out of the citizens. And by the way, imagine this, being a citizen, you're being targeted by your state attorney general's office using your taxpayer dollars, our taxpayer dollars, to go after other citizens. That's just more of the hypocrisy. And they're doing it at the cost of our constitutional rights. And so because of that 9th Circuit Court decision, I anticipate that Gators Guns will get their day in court, and then they will be exonerated. And then we will, because we need to, utilize this as legal precedents to unwind that unconstitutional assault weapons ban and magazine ban. So I stand strong for the Second Amendment. And it's not because I'm necessarily a gun enthusiast. It's because it's in our Constitution. And Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution gives our citizens of Washington State more rights, even more than the Second Amendment of the United States gives us more rights to protect and to defend ourselves and our families. So we should not have a problem. And when we see our Supreme Court, several of which were appointed by this governor because they were in between elections, well, then you can understand how they render these decisions. And so that's where I stand on the Second Amendment and in terms of our gun rights. Someone asked another question. This comes from Rick. What are you going to do about homelessness? And so we've written a solution with action on homelessness so that you understand. Day one, and by the way, homelessness, it's not simply unaffordable housing. Think about this. When you're shooting up in your neck, downtown Seattle, you're not concerned about how much rent you're paying or whether you're paying rent or not. You're concerned only about getting that next fix. And why do I know? Because I have seen it in my own family. I lost my nephew last year to heroin and fentanyl overdose, and he died. And we would have given anything. We would have done anything to protect Dominic, to get him back. But addiction steals your soul, and you have no control over the decisions you make. It's terrible. And compassion is not giving them more needles or instruments to slowly kill themselves. I call that complicity in the murder of our own citizens. That's what I say. Tough love has its place. But as governor of Washington State, we will no longer burn taxpayer dollars on this notion to enrich these nonprofits, to which I call a homelessness industrial complex. We're going to bring real compassion. I will declare a state of emergency, not the one that was recently done where you compromise the civil rights of our citizens. No, that nonsense will never happen under my administration. But utilizing our own resources, our National Guard, to use 10 acres of state land to clear it, to build a facility where we can now have a place for compassion, so that we have a residency program where those who are suffering addiction and mental health can go to these professionals, these citizen soldiers who are professionals with mental health and addiction, professionals that bring forth state-of-the-art medical, dental, dietary, nutrition. If it's good enough for our guardsmen and women, when we put together a base camp and we eat well, we have all of the services we could ever want, it is certainly good enough to bring shelter and protection for our homeless population. And we're going to go further because we must give them hope. We must reduce the recidivism rate from an opioid addiction, which is to say, take away those triggers, which are usually economically caused. And so we will bring in training and certification programs. And so as they get clean from their addiction, and we're training them, and they are leaving the program, they are graduating from our program with a certification or a trade, so that on that Monday, they can report to a job, because we are partnering with our civilian business community who are crying out for qualified and certified workers. Yes, we're shortage on workers, and we know why. Because we shut down our state and we made it more beneficial for people to stay home and not get out there and get a good paying job. We can talk about that a lot later. So now we've cut the recidivism rate when they graduate and they go into that transitional housing program and they have a good paying job. What we're doing is giving them a light at the end of the tunnel, and so that they have a future. They have a future so that they can move forward. And when you have one person that you've raised out of homelessness and addiction or hopelessness and despair, we all benefit from that. Now there's a new taxpayer. There's someone spending money on their economy within their neighborhoods. It is a win-win. It's a win-win for Washington State, and we're going to bring solutions instead of wasting taxpayer dollars. That is just the beginning of our homelessness. And we'll talk about mental health and addiction infrastructure in Washington State, because it's relatively non-existent. People don't realize this. We have two major mental health services hospitals, Eastern States Hospital, Western States Hospital. And because of mismanagement of the Western States Hospital, they lost their certification from Medicare and Medicaid. Along with it went $53 million. We don't have the infrastructure. If every addict wanted to come off the streets and go into an inpatient program to get clean, if that miracle happened and say, okay, we're done, we want a better way of life, we don't even have the infrastructure or the medical professionals or the addiction treatment professionals to help them all. So we have to think of this holistically and strategically. This is the difference a knowledge, skill, or ability in a candidate makes. This is something I'm used to. And so let's see. Someone said, this is from D on the west side. Coming from school board to governor is too big a leap. Your experience is very deep, but many don't realize. So I've kind of shared with you, and I appreciate this from D, a leap too high. Well, I was never going to even serve in the school board. Again, understand, I was a federal executive. I rose up to the most senior ranks of our federal government. Before that, I was a leader in international intelligence. When you look at a person's knowledge, skills, and abilities, and you realize the job that they're applying for, I'm applying for a job to serve as the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Washington State. What do you typically look at when you're considering a new candidate or a new employee? You look at their resume. You look to see, do they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job? But we found ourselves now, what are we looking for? Who has the most name brand recognition? Who has the most money? Who has the biggest donors? You see what's wrong with this? We're not asking a person what they stand for. Do they stand for American values? Do they believe in the Constitution? We're shifting our focus from qualifications and platforms and characteristics of a candidate, and we're saying who's got the most money and how many big name politicians are supporting them. Can you see the dysfunction in that? Can you see what's wrong when you understand what a constitutional republic is? And I'm just going to go there, Article 1, Section 1 of the Washington State Constitution that says power is inherent in the people. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and it is government's job to protect and to maintain the individual rights of citizens. That means we are a citizen-centric country. This is what we call a constitutional republic where power belongs to the people. It has always belonged to the people since the birth of this nation. And it was we, the people, that vested some of our power in government for those governments to represent us. And what does it say in the Declaration? Right after, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator to certain unalienable rights, which among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You go to that next paragraph, and what it says, my friends, is simply this, and I'll summarize. When government forgets and fails to understand what a constitutional republic is and who they serve, then it is up to we, the people, to take a stand to stop it, replace it if necessary, take back our power. That's what I represent as candidate for Washington State Governor. So yes, D, my friend, I do have knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job. I'm equal to the task. I'm ready to step up. I'm ready to get in that office and get things done. And I have the energy. I tell you what, when I became a Green Beret at age 43, they counted me out. They said you couldn't. Are you kidding me, Simi? Right? There's no room for old men in special forces. Well, there I was. Here I am. There's nothing we can't do. This is America. Again, I was raised to be an American, not an Americant. And this is a we the people movement that will paint a picture, a renewal of America, starting here in Washington State. Imagine that, where we the people demonstrate that when we stand strong together, putting people over politics, putting people over party, and saying doing the right thing is always a good thing. That came from Martin Luther King. So looking here, another citizen asked, Rick, taxes for business owners. Here's something that we should always understand. What's important is this. Our small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy. And you all know I love to talk about statistics and facts because they matter. 50.7% of all people, all citizens of Washington State that are working, they are working for small businesses. All our small businesses, again, are the lifeblood. They hire and they employ more Washington citizens, not the big businesses. So when this governor shut down our state, shut down those small businesses and allowed the big businesses, deemed them to be vital and essential. You remember that. And even a couple politicians benefited from that decision as well. No, we will not make that mistake. So when we talk about employment security, we talk about L&I. This is from a center of self-governance perspective, where we say there is a difference between dual federalism, that separation of powers, and cooperative federalism, right? That layer cake or that marble cake, that mixture where you have these non-elected officials that are being utilized to target small businesses with overregulation and abuse of their power. This is why you need leadership who understands that self-governance says that power, again, is inherent in the people. So I do not support that marble cake cooperative federalism that I, as an executive, are going to leverage them against small businesses. I, as the executive and governor of Washington State, will do everything in my power to deregulate and to lift up our small businesses because, again, common sense, statistically proven, they are the lifeblood of our economy, the future of our economy. And we'll talk about innovation and prosperity, bringing more. Washington State should be an innovation center, not just of the Pacific Northwest, but this side of the Mississippi. And while I'm on it, Washington State should be the tourist capital this side of the Mississippi, if not one of the key tourist capitals of the world. When you look at the state, Eastern Washington, Central Washington, Western Washington, we have an international port. We have culture. We have this beauty and diversity. We have all the God-given resources, our rivers, our lakes, our streams, our forests. There's no reason why we are not the most thriving economy this side of the Mississippi. We're going to make it so. And back to those small businesses, that CARES Act, that doesn't care about citizens or small businesses, that's just another tool or opportunity for government mismanagement. Didn't this state administration lose almost $600 million of employment security money? And then Bob Ferguson bragged about recovering $200 million. Well, I'm not a math wizard, but I think you got about $400 million worth of work to be doing, Bob. Get back at it. Leave Gators guns alone. Stop suing other individuals outside of the state and start doing your job and protecting citizens within the state. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's a mindset, folks. It's a mindset. What is your mindset? What is the mindset of this governor or this governor or this governor? I promise you this. If you look at a candidate objectively and fairly, you'll see how they're going to serve. You'll see, you know what my position is on unconstitutional mandates. You know, if you ask Semi Bird, how do you think Jay Inslee did when it came to his response to COVID? The last thing you'll hear out of my mouth is, I thought he did okay. No, he did horrible. And he's responsible for the deaths of innocents, for the despair of many, and for the current state of our economy and our society, which is at the precipice of destruction. No, there was nothing okay about how Jay Inslee responded to the COVID. I would never take those actions, and you'll see. So we're looking down again. We have Talon, beautiful name, right? Let's see here. Nope, that was a technical issue on YouTube. And Talon, I promise you, will get better as we go. Let's see here, Joe. Tax and spending cut plans. Oh my goodness. All right, Joe, thank you for this. Another mindset. We have surplus. This governor has doubled spending since he took office to where he's at. We're at over $70 billion. Over $1 billion from a state level was put into the homelessness program, and homelessness is up exponentially. Well, we already know why, because a fatal flaw of an uninformed or bad leader is to bring forth a solution without understanding the issue. So that's why we're wasting money. So instead of habitually taxing citizens with an excise tax, which is essentially an income tax, and in Washington state it is unconstitutional to impose an income tax. And by the way, when they did this, Bob Ferguson and Jay Inslee, and they called it an excise tax, well, even an Inslee appointed judge at the Superior Court level said, wait a minute, stop the phone. This is an income tax. It's illegal. And Bob said to the Department of Revenue, you keep building the infrastructure to collect. We're going to send this to the Supreme Court, almost as if he knew how the Supreme Court was going to rule over this. Well, they were wrong. And we will make sure that it gets repealed because it was unconstitutional to begin with. And by the way, my friends, that was reference to a Washington state constitutional violation. But when you get into the Second Amendment, I want you to understand this. This is Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the United States Constitution. It's called the Supremacy Clause. Read it, study it, learn it, and then go back to that little paragraph I was telling you about when government forgets their duties. The Supremacy Clause says that no law that is passed that contradicts the U.S. Constitution, which, by the way, November 11th, 1889, when our founders signed our Constitution and they made Article 1, Section 2, the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Why? Even we, later on, decades later, we recognize the supremacy law, the Supremacy Clause that says we as a state cannot undermine the United States Constitution. So how is it that these two lawyers in Washington state, the governor and the attorney general, does not understand? So when it comes time to taxation, here's what I say. With those surpluses we have, why are we not bringing forth legislation? And by the way, Article 3, Section 6 and 7 gives me the authority to propose and recommend legislation and laws. And I will do so as a working governor. Why would we not say when we have a surplus that exceeds what we need to run our government effectively and efficiently, are we not giving that money back to the taxpayers automatically? You reach a level of surplus and those taxes collected from Jane Doe or John Doe goes back to Jane Doe and back to John Doe with a thank you for the loan with interest. We appreciate you. So when it comes time to looking at tax cut plans, well, here's something else I'm going to do. Day one, once we get elected, day one, I'm calling for a third-party audit of all state programs, all state offices, so that we understand where the money's going, number one. Number two, how are those departments and those programs performing? How many of those programs are we fully funding and they're not working, like the homelessness programs throughout the state? But aside from that, how about our acquisition, procurement, and contracting? Are we getting 3 bids on a contract? Are we looking at it to see, is it the best value for our state? Are we doing our due diligence? Who's managing these programs? Where's our strategic plan? I can go on, but this kind of goes back to Dee's question when we talk about knowledge, skills, and abilities. What are you looking for? Someone who has name brand recognition, a lot of money, and the support of powerful, rich, and elite politicians? Are you looking for someone with a resume that can actually do the job? Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, we the people should be looking at that. We the people, you the people, you are this large panel of interviewers that are interviewing me between now, well, I'll go back to say when I started last November on Veterans Day, all the way through November of 2024, when you decide who you want to represent you to save Washington State. Zach asked, let's see here, the difference. So Zach asked, what are the differences between you and Dave Reichert? And Dave Reichert being the other gentleman who's running as a Republican. And I want to make this very clear. I have the utmost respect for Dave Reichert. I do. The gentleman served as a sheriff. He served in Congress. And whether you agreed upon his policies or how he voted, he served. And when you serve in law enforcement, you have to understand, for me, that is something near and dear to me. Those are heroes. And so in terms of differences, I can say, based on my analysis of how he voted, we would have been at different sides of that, different ends of that. I stand for border security, clear. I would have repealed Obamacare if given the opportunity. And there's so much more. But that's not for me to decide publicly. That's up to you to decide as the interviewers of us. I would say there's probably things that we agree upon. I already told you I don't agree with his assessment of Jay Inslee's response to COVID. I didn't necessarily like the article I read that he and Reagan Dunn wrote in terms of the mandates. I was on a different side of that because I thought it was unconstitutional. I thought it was abuse of power. And the fact that all these politicians, both Democrat and Republican, got in line to sign away your rights as citizens. They didn't have that right, according to me. According to the Constitution, they are representing you. This is a constitutional republic. Yeah, that should have went to some kind of a vote of the people asking us, do we want to give away and suspend our rights as citizens for an emergency powers? And then we have to fight to get it back? No. This is why we need of the people, by the people, for the people. And so I guess if you were to ask another differences, and I think I've spelled out, hopefully with kindness, grace, and respect to the other gentleman who's running, I would say it's up to you to decide, not to me. But those were factual, accurate differences between us. But even I say that with respect for him. Great respect. Good man, kind man. Let's see here. We're getting YouTube put together over there. Let's see here. Yeah, Inslee did some damage. And let me say this, you guys. This is something that's different for me than other politicians. I'm not at war with Democrats. I'm a Republican running as a Republican. But I'm a constitutional Republican. And what kind of Republican am I? Oh, my goodness. I'm the Republican of 1854. I would have been that former Whig that was standing up a new party that recognized the institution of slavery was evil and it must be abolished. I would have been in that camp. I would have been in the Republican camp that said women's rights are American rights. I would have been in that camp that said civil rights or American rights, civil rights or human rights. This is the kind of Republican I am. And parents' rights. Parents, again, the primary stakeholders of their children's lives and education. Those are the rights that I stand for, without equivocation. And so I'm an old school Republican. And we're in a two-party system. I wish I could simply say, and I've been a Republican my entire life. I did an interview with a gentleman from the Seattle Times earlier today, and he asked many of these questions. He asked the questions, or alluded to, the GOP establishment and how they've kind of deemed me persona non grata. They're not against me personally, right? They don't dislike me. They just have a mindset of winning that is different from mine and that of many of our citizens, to say that the ends do not justify the means, and we will never compromise our values or our belief system simply for an election or under the banner of winning. A person's platform, beliefs should be taken into consideration. Their values should be taken into consideration. Their resume and how they will serve the people of the state should be taken into consideration. These are things that are very important. And I see another gentleman, another Rick H., I'll say. Rick H. asks, what about the affordable housing issue, right? Or what are we doing with that, right? The housing crisis. Well, why are we not starting with deregulation? So I've been a general contractor. I understand civil engineering. I've built homes in Washington State professionally. Why are we not deregulating? Because we know when we impose more costs, look at the energy hits that they're putting on builders now because of this climate change. How long it takes to get a permit, the excessive cost of permits, all those expenses has to come from somewhere, and they're recharged back to clients. So the cost of a building, in order to regain, right, to have a profit, you have to raise the cost. But if you deregulate and you lower the cost of building, you should understand that it is better for business if I don't have to raise my costs to exorbitant numbers. I can do better business and more of it. Here's the other thing. Why are we not, as a state, partnering with the small businesses, developers, to say we have land to be cleared? Why don't we make a long-term contract which provides you with a long-term residual income contract to where you bring forward, you foot the cost for all the development, all of the expenses, knowing that you have a contract with our state government for the long term. That contract is worth big money that can be leveraged for other business and development. But we say in that contract that this development is specific to affordable housing needs of Washington State and Washington citizens. Why are we not doing this? Business 101 requires a business mindset. Again, knowledge, skills, and abilities matters. And I'm looking at more questions as we're kind of getting towards the end of our hour. And I want to keep it on track because there's so much. And I do really love your questions. Oh, my goodness. Someone even mentioned any law, rule, edict, mandate that is repugnant of the Constitution. Oh, my goodness. You're speaking to my heart. You're right. It's wrong. And it should have never come to bear. And so when you hear a politician use those words, run. Run. Because they're telling you their mindset. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, when you have a mindset that you don't understand how the Constitution works, that's a dangerous mindset. And by the way, the Constitution is for everyone. Everyone. All citizens. And I would also say that we as a state have an obligation to, rebuild our social services system. When we have a welfare system that pays marginalized communities just enough money to stay poor for generations, that is a dysfunction that needs to be fixed. Welfare system has never been made to be a retirement system or a pension system. It is a hand up, not a handout. Jobs is the real freedom in this nation, as well as education. Martin Luther King Jr. knew that. That was that march in Washington, right? That is what we need to get back to. We have another one as we'll wrap it up. We'll close with a couple more here. Let's see here. From your campaign. So people have asked in terms of a pathway to victory. I want you to understand this. We have one, and it's clear, actually. And so we have been campaigning since last November in the inner city of Seattle, up and down the I-5 corridor. So those counties that we have received Republican nominations or Republican endorsements from, most of them were along the I-5 corridor because I was out actually campaigning, right? Not, again, maybe in small rooms or large rooms with big money and big politicians. I was in every place with everyday citizens, bringing my message and appealing to them to support a We the People candidate who believes in the Constitution, that believes in a new era of prosperity and growth, where we can lift people up out of poverty and despair, bring forth jobs, certifications, trades, to get people back to work so that they understand that value and their self-worth. This is how we lift people up. We don't need more of the establishment's failed strategies or policies to go into another 40-year losing streak with the same strategy they've been playing. Don't take my word for it. Go back to every other candidate on the conservative side that has lost. It was the same talking points. I say that not to disparage or to attack. I say that as a point of realization. So our pathway to victory is this. We are bringing in more people, independent, Democrat, and young people. And by the way, this is not me compromising my values or beliefs. Some people think you have to dress up and act like something else to get elected in Washington State. I don't believe that. I believe you need someone with the right message, certainly the right messenger, to convey what America truly is, a land of opportunity, and to bring forth your solutions and how you plan to create those opportunities for all, how you plan on dealing with the lawlessness, how you plan on holding those prosecutors and those judges accountable for catch and release so that criminals can go back out, reoffend, and do harm to law-abiding citizens. I have come forward and I have said very clearly, number one, we will monitor them as a state CEO and call them out for their abysmal record compromising public safety so that citizens, when they come back up for their re-elections, citizens can see their public safety score, whether high, meaning they enforced the rule of law and held criminals accountable, or whether their public safety score was low, catch and release. That is one. Number two, I will look for a legal argument and precedent to say if you are violating your oath of office and not enforcing the rule of law, you are in contravention of the rule of law, and you yourself should be held accountable, and your position should be relinquished because you clearly do not understand it. We need brave, bold steps to protect the citizens of Washington State. The time for talk is over. The time for action is now. This is what we're bringing to the table. And as much as I'd like to stay with you for another hour, we're not. We're going to wrap here, but I do want to answer one more questions. We're talking about gas prices. You cannot help but understand that the Climate Commitment Act that was passed, that is what's responsible for the increase in your gas prices. 50 cents more per gallon for gasoline, 63 cents more per gallon of diesel. And when you look at heating your homes this winter, oil and natural gas, those prices are going to go up. And this administration tried to hide the facts that the Climate Commitment Act is responsible for those increases in gas and fuel. That law needs to be repealed. It doesn't need to be massaged. We've collected over $1.5 billion from those permits of cap and trade, cap and invest, climate commitment, whatever you want to call it. It's a Climate Commitment Act, and needs to be repealed because although this administration sought to punish carbon producers, the fossil fuel industry, they're punishing the citizens and the most vulnerable of our citizens, those who are living at or below the poverty line. That's common sense to say that if you're hurting those citizens that you are here to serve, fix it. Repeal that act. It's wrong. Just like the assault weapons ban, just like the magazine ban, just like that income tax that they're calling an excise tax, just like Senate Bill 5599 that compromises the innocence of children and allows for transgender sex change without parents' approval. That is evil. And that is not me taking a stance against LGBTQAI+, whatever you want to say. I love everyone, but what I'm saying is we protect the innocence of our children and we value the rights of families and parents always. At least we will in my administration. So we have a lot of corrections to make. I have the energy, the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the wherewithal, and the mindset to make it happen. There's a lot more to this than name brand recognition and how much money you can make. Don't fall for this. Let's get back to our roots of America, the Constitution, unity. It's about time we stand loud and proud and we say we don't judge people based on the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. We stand strong to say this is a constitutional republic where power is inherent in the people. And we, the people, now are reclaiming our heritage and our right as defined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. This is we, the people, coming together, standing strong, righting those wrongs. Look for a candidate that will honor his or her word. In my case, you know I will. That is it for now, my friends. I'm going to leave you. And I want to leave you with a thought that there is nothing that we cannot accomplish when we stand strong together. Democrat, Republican, Independent. But we stand strong for common sense. We stand strong for American values. We stand strong for civility and human decency. We get back to our common sense American values that made us the greatest country on the planet. It is all based on we, the people, standing strong together. Never give up on America. It begins with you. Thank you, and God bless you guys.